Hello and welcome to this channel. I'm Joshua, and this channel is dedicated to discussions about intelligent design theory and evolution. I've been interested and written about ID for quite a few years, primarily on my blog actually, which shares the same name as this channel, Design Disquisitions. It's a bit of a mouthful, but it's what it is. I'll put a link to my blog in the description where you can read some of my articles on these topics. I decided that a YouTube channel in tandem with a blog would be a good combination. Some material lends itself to more, written word format, and some more to a video type of thing. So, but I won't be posting identical content on both mediums, although there might be a little bit of overlap here and there. So I also, I hope to engage with other people on this channel as well, where you can discuss with proponents of ID and also critics. And these days, I think, many people tend to prefer watching and listening to stuff rather than reading long, detailed articles. Although I think it's good to do a combination of both. I can't promise to keep on top of either my blog or this channel all the time, since life often has a habit of getting in the way, but I'll be posting stuff when and where I can, basically. So on this channel, I hope to explore the many fascinating areas that relate to intelligent design and evolution. So the material here will mostly be about biology, philosophy of science, philosophy of biology, and a few other areas as well. And although I am interested in physics, and I recognise that intelligent design isn't limited to biology, on this channel I will be focusing on designing biology. Okay, so the main reason for this is that I'm just more interested in biology as a field of study, and I would rather kind of stay focused on a narrow area rather than giving brief and superficial treatments to several areas. So it's probably best to leave the physics to those more acquainted with the field. Although I'm no way an expert in biology or any of its subdisciplines, I don't claim to be an authority, so I think that's important to mention. I have attempted, and I continue to attempt to do my homework. I've studied the natural sciences at an undergraduate level, and I've done some other formal training over the years. But I do my best to keep up with the literature on both sides of these discussions, including the more technical peer-reviewed literature that explores matters related to ID. So I'm always learning. I am open to correction as well. I appreciate any feedback to any of the content on these videos. So just to give you an overview of my background, so you know where I'm coming from. I am a proponent of intelligent design, although over the years my views on the origins matter has varied. I am perhaps unsurprisingly a Christian. As a teenager, when I kind of began to give my Christian faith some thought, I became interested in the creation-evolution dispute, and at that point I kind of assumed a kind of young earth creationist position, and stuck with it for a while. This was probably in my late teens, roughly. And after a little research, however, I soon changed my mind and rejected young earth creationism for kind of theistic evolutionary perspective. And this change of mind was primarily through reading this book, Finding Darwin's God, a Scientist's Search for Common Ground Between God and Evolution, which is by Kenneth Miller. He's a cell biologist at Brown University. He's a well-known ID critic. If you're at all acquainted with these issues, you'll definitely have come across Ken Miller. So this book had a huge impact on me. I read it probably when I was in my early university days. And through reading this book, I came to think that young Earth creationism, anti-evolutionism, is a profoundly mistaken viewpoint. And in this book, Miller kind of provides a detailed critique of young Earth creationism, ID, but to be fair, he does go after some of the atheistic neo-Darwinians like Richard Dawkins, Daniel Dennett. But his main aim is to show that there's overwhelming evidence for evolution and that it doesn't contradict Christian belief as well. So I remember after completing the book, I think about I remember reading it a few times actually. I was really overwhelmed. Prior to reading it, I didn't really know much about biology at all, and for that matter, science in general. And by contrast, Miller, he's clearly a smart and knowledgeable biologist. He's a perspicuous expositor. He's an extroverted rhetorician as well. If you've ever seen any of his videos and his lectures or debates, you'll know what I'm talking about. So he basically won me over. And I was still slightly muddled about some of the issues surrounding this new outlook. But kind of in the end, I eagerly left my young Earth creationist views behind me, and I voluptuously embraced theistic evolution. As for ID, apart from reading Miller's account, an apparent refutation of it, I kind of just took his word for it, basically, despite the fact that I didn't really know much about ID. So this was a big mistake on my part, because after a while I began to explore some of the work of design theorists, and as I became more aware of what ID really is, I realised that Miller's criticisms aren't as successful as I previously thought, and I slowly began to see that his responses to ID, are littered with drastic misrepresentations and faulty reasoning. So the problem was I'd been far too credulous and hadn't sufficiently explored the views that I was dismissing. These days, I'm a lot, I'm not as easily persuaded to change positions on most things. So, you learn from those sorts of things anyway. So from then on, I kind of came less certain of my views, and I became more sympathetic to ID. And in reading kind of further responses to ID, I found that the more I read and listened to critics like Ken Miller, Eugenie Scott, Barbara Forrest, Robert Pennock, the more I felt that ID theorists were being misunderstood and misrepresented. So after doing a lot of reading and thinking, I eventually concluded, provisionally of course, that ID theorists like William Dembski, Michael Behe, Stephen Meyer, that are essentially correct in claiming that the apparent design in nature is the result of an intelligent cause, and that design can be scientifically detected. And furthermore, I came to believe that I believe ID to be a legitimate scientific theory full of exciting potential to further inspire a fruitful scientific research program. Of course, I don't agree with every single aspect of ID. There's certain areas where I differ slightly, but basically, I agree with the key elements of it. Aside from my views on ID, there are a couple of other contentious issues that crop up in these kind of discussions. So I think in this video it'd be good to nail my colours to the mast, so no assumptions need to be made about me. With regard to whether I'm a creationist or not, I would consider myself to be one, but only in the sense of being a Christian who believes that God is the creator of the universe. And as a Christian ID proponent, obviously I believe God to be ultimately responsible for the design we find in nature. But as many other ID theorists have pointed out, this conclusion isn't necessitated by ID itself. It's one that's reached for non-scientific reasons. So this means that whilst I may be a creationist in one sense of the term, I don't necessarily advocate capital C creationism, if you like. Although, of course, I don't hold any ill will toward my traditionally creationist friends, and I'm more than happy to join in with their support for ID. So I'm happy to accept the age of the Earth and the universe that cosmologists have settled on. I take the Genesis creation accounts to be largely figurative, non-literal, whatever terminology you want to use for that. And I certainly deny that the Bible necessitates a literalist kind of young Earth creationist view of the days in Genesis. I also happen to think, that common descent is a reasonable position to hold, and it makes most sense after the evidence. But I'm not dogmatic about that. It's not, strictly relevant to ID. So, I'm not an anti-evolutionist, but at the same time, I do think modern evolutionary theory is inadequate to explain life's origins and development. So, with regard to my views on neo-Darwinism and its relationship to theology, I happen to think that they can be quite compatible. This might come as a surprise to some people, given that skepticism of evolution is often coupled with a perceived contradiction between evolution and theology, but I don't see it that way. My theological views don't prevent me from accepting a fully natural view of biological history. I just don't think the evidence bears it out. So it's not a theological question for me. My position, it's not theologically motivated. I'm not trying to gain apologetic mileage to shore, from ID to shore up my faith. And it's true to say that although I began as a religiously motivated young Earth creationist, I soon fell in love with science, biology in particular, seeing it as an end in itself as opposed to seeing it as merely a means to a theological end. And so, as I've mentioned, this channel is focused primarily on science. My personal theological views won't be discussed elsewhere unless I really have to. But much of what I've said, in this account, it's not actually relevant to my position on ID. But so the reason I chose to mention these things was because ID proponents are too often scurrilously accused of having pernicious theocratic motives. So I thought putting my cards on the table clearly now will hopefully mean that I won't have to explain myself elsewhere or have erroneous assumptions made about me. So I hope this video will clear things up. So that's a bit of my background and lays out some of my intentions behind this channel. I'll be posting more content soon, so be on the lookout for that. In the meantime, feel free to subscribe, and do let me know in the comments if there are any particular questions or topics you would like to see addressed in other videos. Although I've got plenty of ideas of things that are lined up. So thanks very much for watching. I hope you found that interesting, and I will be back very soon. Thank you very much.